We will divide our training session here into 4 components, or rather 4 use cases. We'll begin by talking about a use case of validating a particular trend that you may have heard of, or you may have been tasked to determine its validity and importance around and whether it's relevant to your business. So that's the first use case we'll tackle. We'll then move on to a second use case on assessing the potential importance of a particular threat to your business. So we'll look at that and look at how we can leverage MotivBase to assess that. The third use case we picked was to determine a particular category growth potential or opportunity. So we'll pick a category that is currently nascent or small and look at a use case on how to determine or how to identify opportunities or ways to expand that particular market using MotivBase. And then lastly, we'll look at a use case that examines the differences between 2 seasonal events and helps us identify how those differences can be leveraged in programs and initiatives. So I'll start with the first use case, which is on validating a trend. For this particular case, I've selected the trend of beer, a particular type of beer packaging called growlers, which you might be very familiar with. So let's pick that. Let's ask MotivBase to rerun that search. I just saved it here under projects. By the way, if you want to access projects, all you have to do is toggle that menu on the right side and click on projects. And I'll talk about how to save your projects as well in a second here. So let the results pop up here. Okay, so we've got the results here. A quick search for growlers in the context of beer. So this is what I call a 2-topic search. And the reason for that, quite simply, was that when I started to put growlers into the search window, I noticed that in the autofill, there was no beer growler as an option. And that is why I had to first begin with a topic called growlers and then add the context of beer. I'll show you that example in a second and how I arrived at that. Okay, so let's look at the search results here. One of the first things you need to keep in mind is the relationship section. The relationship section really helps us determine if we've arrived at the right context for our search. When we set out to examine the culture of beer packaging and specifically beer growlers, and you put in these 2 topics, the relationships really indicates to us that we've actually picked the right set of topics here for what we wanted to accomplish. So if you look at some of these keywords, clearly we were searching for the right thing. So that's the first thing you need to look for. Just in terms of functionality, what you'll notice is that as part of examining these relationships, there are 2 things that we can often do or will often find ourselves doing. One of the first things is you could select any one of these relationships and it will overlay the terms you've added into search along with the term that you or the relationship that you just picked. So it's a good way to assess whether the volume is large enough, if it's potentially related to your original search topics, and if you choose to add that particular topic into search, all you have to do is press that plus sign and it'll immediately integrate that, and then you'll see that relationships evolve as well. And when those relationships evolve, you can further discern whether you've enhanced your search query and the context of your search or whether you've kind of taken it too far. As a general suggestion, we recommend strongly to stick to 1 topic searches as much as possible. If you must, 2 topic searches. This is a 3-topic search and is not recommended. I will explain why in a later session. But for the time being, let's continue with our growlers and beer search as I started this use case with. So this is a use case of validating a trend. So let's say, my boss has just told me I work for a company that manufactures beer and we're examining whether growlers should be part of a packaging solution. So MotivBase has just crunched through 7 million relationships among 600,000 topics and looked at 63,000 unique people over the course of 2017 to give us the result set. What MotivBase is immediately teaching us is that in the United States, The core market for beer growlers is 5 million people, and the addressable market is close to 19 million. Now, it's also telling me how mature this particular trend is. It is in the early majority stage, and it occupies 28% of the addressable market. So its maturity reaches about 28% of those 19 million people in that addressable market. So it's in the early majority stages, which means certainly from a maturity standpoint, it seems to be at the right stage, at the right time, if that is something that my brand should potentially consider as an example. But of course, it's important to keep in mind that the total addressable market is only 19 million people, and the core market is only 5 million at the moment. The next section breaks out the sociodemographics. I don't think I need to really walk you through this. It's just a matter of exploration. And then the following section provides us the ethnographic level insight, ranking the top motivations, attitudes, fears, and values in order of importance with a depth of connection indicator. In this particular case, what you'll notice is the strength of connection is quite strong with everything, and that's fine. It's actually quite rare to see that. Oftentimes, you'll find that after the first 2 or 3 motivations, the long tail starts to appear. There's a pretty significant drop in the strength of connection. What this just shows us is that there are numerous motivations and numerous attitudes and fears and values at play here, driving an interest in growlers. So one of the top motivations here is appearing knowledgeable and cultured. If I want to understand what that motivation is, I can just click that and it drops it down and gives me an explanation that this is about people who are well educated and they really want to possess cultural knowledge and acquire it over time, and they just kind of show it off. And the growler is a symbol of that. Similarly, the second motivation says prove that they're worthy of their position in the world. This really talks about people who feel like they need to prove that they're deserving of their place in society, and so on and so forth. So this is really up for exploration, and you can spend as much time as you like on this. And then the next section, of course, is the brands and influencers section, which breaks down the top brands and influencers in the context of these factors. So what that really means is this is not just a list of brands and influencers in the context of growlers and beer. It's in the context of this specific permutation of factors as it relates to growlers and beer. So it's a very contextual brands and influencers analysis, which means it often also helps us identify brands and influencers that are quite unique or that we may never have even heard of in the past. And then lastly, another context setting section is the article section, which, just like the relationship section, really helps us gain further perspective and on the context of the search. And if we want to explore some of these topics further or understand what's really going on in culture and the news media around a particular topic, the article section really does a great job of categorizing the top articles as it pertains to this particular topic of search. So this, in essence, is a quick walkthrough of how you would go about searching on MotivBase, but applied specifically to the use case of validating a trend. What this really teaches us is that MotivBase can very quickly help us evaluate whether a particular trend is large enough for our business, whether it's mature enough for our business, and more importantly, whether it currently caters to a sociodemographic that matches with our guest at the moment or with our type of customer at the moment, and so on. Now, while I'm just showcasing this particular use case to you, I do want to also use this opportunity to explain the notion of a two-topic search. So let me take away beer here for a second to demonstrate what happens. Just observe the relationship section here. The moment I take out beers, you'll notice that the relationship section changes significantly. Suddenly what you find is while beer is part of the discussion, there's a whole bunch of other topics here that don't necessarily make sense to me. Zombie dust, really? It doesn't really make sense to me, and certainly does not indicate that the context that MotivBase has understood of what I'm really looking for is the right one. That is really what made me consider a second topic in order to give my search context. And so I started looking for just simply the word beer, and I re-examined the relationships and noticed very quickly that the relationships were more aligned with what I was looking for. So that's really how I arrived at the right contextual search in this particular case. The other thing you'll also notice is a couple of interesting things. The first one is if you want to add a workspace or add another search to this particular search, and sort of even run comparisons, all you have to do is click that plus sign and type in a new keyword. And then, of course, anything you work on, you can save it by simply clicking the little old school floppy disk over there, and it'll immediately save your workspace. So just as an example, I'm just going to click this plus sign here to do a quick comparison. This time I will pick growlers, and instead of beer, let me specifically look at craft beer. There we go. And boom, you hit apply. MotivBase will crunch the numbers as usual and give us two result sets. And then you see this button compare on the right side here. You hit that, and I'll basically compare the two search topics. I'll just wait here for a second while the results load. Once the results have loaded, one of the things you can do here is you can also rename these workspaces so that when you hit compare, the workspaces are quite clearly explained or easy to read. So for example, for that, all you have to do is click on workspace 2, hit rename. I'm going to rename this craft beer growler. And I'm going to rename this as well. Again, just click twice there, select rename, and this time I'll just go beer and growler. Boom. And now I can hit the compare tab, and it immediately compares the two and tells me that craft beer and growler are a little more nascent than beer and growler as a topic. They both occupy pretty similar market spaces. I don't think there's any surprise there, with minor differences in sociodemographics. It's actually kind of interesting. The moment you add craft beer, it skews less of couples and children and more of single people and people without children, which is just interesting. And then, of course, at the bottom section here, the same ethnographic section gets broken out into commonalities between the two workspaces and exclusivities between the two workspaces. So that tells us if there's a particular motivation or a particular fear that's more specific to a certain search term and less specific to another one. For example, craft beer growler, more about doing environmentally right choices, making environmentally good choices, while about just beer in general is more about sophistication knowledge. Again, quite fascinating when you look at the culture of craft beer consumption and how people associate it with better environmental consumption practices. Similarly, you can toggle fears and values and attitudes to really understand what's unique, common amongst the different searches. So I'll stop here and I'll end this particular module here, and then we'll go on to the next module in a second.